Across the heart of Africa, a seismic shift is underway, shaking the very foundation of post-colonial power dynamics. In an unprecedented move, Chad, once a linchpin of French influence in the Sahel, has demanded that all French troops leave its borders permanently and declared an end to military cooperation with its former colonizer. This is no isolated act. It's the latest domino to fall in a region where resentment toward French dominance has reached a boiling point. Over the past 2 years, neighboring nations like Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali have taken similarly defiant steps, expelling French forces and cutting ties. What was once a firm alliance between France and its former colonies is now unraveling, replaced by a wave of anti-French sentiment that's reshaping Africa's geopolitical landscape. These nations are no longer willing to play the role of dependents in a neo-colonial relationship. They are demanding respect, sovereignty, and a future defined on their own terms. But Chad's decision is particularly significant. As a longtime ally of France in the fight against terrorism and a key player in regional security, this move could send shockwaves far beyond its borders.
The French military presence in Chad is not based on a reciprocal foundation. Chad must no longer accept from others what they don't accept for themselves. This is the sacred principle of reciprocity, the need for correction. It is now crucial for Chad to address the shortcomings in its international relations.
The decision to withdraw French troops is an exclusively sovereign decision with regard to Chad, and we felt that after several decades of independence and proclamation of the Republic, it was no longer useful to have a foreign military base in our homeland.
What does this mean for the Sahel's fight against extremist groups? How will this decision impact global powers vying for influence in Africa, from Russia to China? And what does it reveal about the growing demand for self-determination across the continent? In today's video, we'll break down Chad's stunning decision, uncover the forces driving this anti-French wave, and explore how this growing resistance could reshape Africa's future and its place in the world. Buckle up, because this is more than just a political shift. It's the story of a continent rewriting its destiny. This is more than just a story, it's a movement. Africa is reclaiming its lost glory and destiny, and you can be part of spreading this powerful message. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and let's shine a light on the leaders who are building a new Africa, one bold decision at a time. In recent years, the Sahel region of Africa has become the epicenter of a dramatic political and ideological transformation. The spark? A wave of military coups in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, 3 nations with long histories of French influence and intervention. These events have not only reshaped leadership in the region, but have ignited a broader movement of resistance against France, whose decades-long presence in its former colonies is increasingly seen as a form of neo-colonialism. Our story begins in Mali, where dissatisfaction with corruption, insecurity, and a lack of economic progress under civilian rule culminated in a military coup in August 2020. Led by Colonel Assimi Goïta, the coup toppled President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. At its core, the coup was fueled by public outrage over the government's inability to address growing jihadist violence, despite years of French military assistance under Operation Barkhane. The new military leadership accused France of failing to stabilize the region while pursuing its own strategic interests. In a bold move, Mali expelled French troops and turned to other international players, notably Russia, for military support. The arrival of the Wagner Group marked a turning point, as Mali signaled its desire to break away from France's orbit entirely. Next, the flames of discontent spread to Burkina Faso. In January 2022, the military ousted President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore, citing his failure to combat a growing insurgency that had claimed thousands of lives. However, dissatisfaction with the transitional leadership led to a second coup in September 2022, bringing Captain Ibrahim Traoré to power. Much like Mali, Burkina Faso's new leaders openly criticized France for its ineffective counter-terrorism operations and accused Paris of exploiting the country's resources. The government expelled the French ambassador and terminated military agreements with France, signaling a decisive break. Instead, Burkina Faso embraced closer ties with Russia and other non-Western powers, echoing Mali's strategy. In July 2023, the anti-French sentiment reached Niger, a nation long regarded as one of France's most reliable allies in West Africa. Military leaders overthrew President Mohamed Bazoum, citing widespread dissatisfaction with governance and security failures. The coup leaders, led by General Abdourahmane Chiani, declared an end to French dominance in Niger, including calls for the removal of French troops stationed there. The move was met with swift international condemnation, but within Niger, it was widely celebrated. Protesters in the capital, Niamey, waved Russian flags and demanded that France leave. France's refusal to recognize the coup only deepened the resentment, while the military junta consolidated power and moved closer to other anti-Western allies in the region. These coups were not merely reactions to domestic challenges. They were expressions of a deeper, shared frustration with France's enduring influence in its former colonies. Decades after gaining independence, many Sahelian nations remain economically tied to France through the CFA franc, politically constrained by French-aligned elites and militarily dependent on French forces. For the people of the Sahel, the failure of these arrangements to bring security or prosperity has led to growing anger. France's military operations, once seen as a bulwark against terrorism, are now widely viewed as ineffective and self-serving. The coups have amplified this sentiment as military leaders position themselves as champions of sovereignty and independence. France's influence in the Sahel is crumbling before our eyes, and the world is watching. If you want more videos that unpack the truth behind global power shifts, hit like and subscribe now. And tell us, is this the beginning of a stronger Africa or a new era of challenges? Let's discuss. Chad takes a bold move, a dramatic shift in the Sahel. In November 2024, Chad delivered a stunning blow to France's waning influence in Africa by announcing it was cutting all military ties with its former colonial ruler. This decision came after months of mounting tensions and marked a critical turning point in the broader anti-France wave sweeping across the Sahel region. For years, Chad had been a cornerstone of France's military presence in the Sahel. As home to the French-led Operation Barkhane's regional headquarters, Chad played a vital role in France's supposed counter-terrorism operations. However, growing frustration among Chadians about France's perceived failure to stabilize the region and its broader neo-colonial influence set the stage for this historic break. This discontent reached a boiling point in early November 2024, when Jean-Noël Barrot, France's foreign minister, visited N'Djamena in an effort to salvage the strained relationship. Barrot's visit was intended to reassure Chad of France's commitment to their partnership, particularly in the fight against jihadist insurgencies.
Nous procédons à un changement de posture militaire.
We are reviewing our military positioning.
Nos partenariats.
The goal is to redefine our partnerships with our African partners so our association can better meet their needs, be faster and more flexible.
Plus rapidement à leurs attentes.
However, the discussions reportedly did little to ease the underlying grievances.
I believe France's foreign minister irritated his Chadian partners. For months now, Chadian diplomats and leaders have worked hard to show world powers that they are not lending a hand to foreign powers trying to intervene and meddle in the war in Sudan.
I think the Chadian government is right to ask for the departure of French soldiers, because our country has been independent for 66 years, and the French military's goal is to steal our natural resources. Nothing good about it.
Sources close to the negotiations revealed that Chad's transitional military government, led by President Mahamat Idriss Déby Itno, had grown increasingly disillusioned with France. Criticisms centered on France's unilateral approach to military operations, failure to deliver meaningful economic development, and perceived meddling in Chadian politics. During Barrett's visit, protests erupted in N'Djamena and other cities, with thousands of Chadians demanding the removal of French troops. Demonstrators accused France of exploiting Chad's resources while failing to address the nation's deep-rooted security and economic challenges. Many carried signs calling for sovereignty and chanted slogans echoing those heard in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Under mounting domestic pressure and emboldened by the recent anti-French movements in neighboring countries, Chad's government made a decisive move. Just hours after Barrett's visit, the government announced the immediate termination of all military agreements with France and demanded the withdrawal of French troops. But Chad didn't just demand the withdrawal of French troops and warplanes from its borders. It permanently ended a 58-year-old agreement with its former colonizer. The Defense Cooperation Agreement between Chad and France was initially signed in 1966, shortly after the Front for the National Liberation of Chad was established by a coalition of Muslim opposition groups led by Ibrahim Abacha in Niala, Sudan, on June 22, 1966. The French government agreed to provide economic assistance to the government on September 9, 1966, and so started a series of decades-long military interventions that finally ended in November. During a recent address, President Mahamat Deby described the agreement as archaic and discordant with current geopolitical realities.
Over time, this agreement has become outdated, completely outdated. It no longer aligns with the current geopolitical realities, the strategies of our era, or our legitimate expectations for the full expression of our sovereignty. The French military presence in Chad is not based on a reciprocal foundation. Chad must no longer accept from others what they don't accept for themselves. This is the sacred principle of reciprocity, the need for correction. It is now crucial for Chad to address the shortcomings in its international relations.
According to the initial agreement and subsequent revisions, the Defense Cooperation Agreement was supposed to bolster Chad's military capabilities, providing training, equipment, and operational support from one of the world's most advanced militaries. However, the agreement only solidified Chad's dependence on French military and financial aid. While it provided some short-term benefits, it left the nation vulnerable to foreign influence and undermined efforts to build an autonomous defense infrastructure. Additionally, the economic returns of the partnership were minimal for ordinary citizens, as much of the financial aid was tied to military priorities rather than addressing poverty or underdevelopment. As a result, many Chadians grew increasingly resentful of the agreement, viewing the continued French military presence as a symbol of neo-colonial control. Protests and public discourse frequently highlighted how the agreement seemed to prioritize France's strategic interests, such as securing access to resources and maintaining regional influence, over Chad's sovereignty and development. Chadians also pointed out that despite the agreement, insecurity worsened in Chad and the Sahel as jihadist groups adapted and expanded their operations. Civilian populations in conflict zones bore the brunt of violence, with many questioning the effectiveness of France's intervention and the partnership's real value. These issues reached a boiling point after Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger forced France out the door and seized control of their own affairs. While announcing the end of the agreement, Chad's foreign minister, Abderrahmane Koulibaly, called France an essential partner, but said it must now also consider that Chad has grown up, matured, and is a sovereign state that is very jealous of its sovereignty.
France is an essential partner, but it must now also consider that Chad has grown up. Chad has matured. Chad is a sovereign state.
The ministry also noted that the decision to terminate the deal would enable the country to redefine its strategic partnerships. In keeping with the exit notice, French warplanes left Chad in mid-December, and it has begun handing over its military bases. It handed over its first military base, the Faya Largeau base in northern Chad, last week. Some of the over 1,000 French army personnel in the country have also begun exiting the country, much to the delight of patriotic Chadians. In a televised address to the nation on Tuesday, President Mahamat Deby announced a deadline of January 31st for all French troops to exit the Central African country. "I welcome the withdrawal of the first wave of French forces stationed in Chad," the president said. "Other waves will follow until the complete withdrawal on January 31st, 2025. Any fight for independence or sovereignty has its sacrifices, and we owe them to future generations, just as our elders made sacrifices to bequeath us a standing country, the Chadian president added. Chad's announcement is a devastating blow to France's already diminishing influence in the Sahel. Over the past 2 years, France has faced expulsion from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, nations that once formed the backbone of its military strategy in Africa. Chad was one of the few remaining allies in the region, and its defection marks a near-complete collapse of France's security apparatus in Francophone Africa. This decision is emblematic of a larger shift, the rejection of France's post-colonial dominance. For decades, France relied on military cooperation and economic ties, such as the CFA franc, to maintain its foothold in Africa. However, the growing frustration over these arrangements, viewed by many as a form of neo-colonialism, has ignited a wave of resistance. And it's not just resistance against France, but against the West in general. All over the world, alliances are changing, and countries are saying a firm no to the West. Instead, countries like Chad, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are forging new alliances, particularly with Russia and other non-Western powers. For Paris, Chad's decision underscores the failure of its strategy in Africa. Once a dominant power, France now finds itself increasingly isolated, scrambling to redefine its role on the continent. A brighter future for Chad and the Sahel. Chad's decision to sever military ties with France is more than a geopolitical headline. It's a profound declaration of independence that echoes across the Sahel. For decades, nations like Chad, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have struggled under the weight of external influence, inherited economic systems, and foreign-led security strategies that often prioritized outside interests over local needs. Now, the region is taking bold steps to reclaim its sovereignty, rewrite its narrative, and chart a future defined by its people. The road here has been anything but easy. The Sahel has faced relentless challenges: extremist violence, economic underdevelopment, political instability, and the lingering scars of colonialism. For years, foreign interventions were seen as the only solution to these issues. Yet, as history has shown, external forces can only do so much without the genuine empowerment of local communities and leadership. Chad's move symbolizes a turning point, not just for itself, but for the entire region. By ending its military agreements with France, Chad is joining a broader movement that demands dignity, sovereignty, and accountability. This decision reflects the will of its people, who yearn for self-determination and solutions tailored to their unique challenges. While these changes bring uncertainty, they also hold immense promise. The Sahel's rejection of outdated systems offers an opportunity to build new frameworks of cooperation, ones that prioritize African-led solutions, inclusive development, and sustainable security. Nations in the Sahel are forging stronger ties, united by shared goals and challenges. By working together, they can address cross-border issues like terrorism, climate change, and economic development with a unified voice. The pivot away from France doesn't mean isolation, it means diversification. Chad and its neighbors are engaging with a wider range of global partners, creating opportunities for trade, investment, and innovation while maintaining their autonomy. Reclaiming sovereignty is not just political, it's cultural. The Sahel is rediscovering and celebrating its heritage, traditions, and resilience, fostering a sense of unity and pride that transcends borders. As Chad and other nations assert their independence, they are challenging outdated narratives about Africa as a continent of perpetual crisis. Instead, the Sahel is emerging as a region of strength, agency, and possibility. Of course, the journey ahead will not be without challenges. Transitioning away from decades of dependency requires careful planning, strong governance, and the collective will of leaders and citizens alike. However, the determination shown by nations like Chad is proof that change is possible, even in the face of immense obstacles. This is a pivotal moment, not just for Chad, but for the Sahel as a whole. As these nations rise to reclaim their destiny, they remind the world that Africa's future belongs to its people. With unity, vision, and resilience, Chad and its neighbors can transform the Sahel from a region once overshadowed by insecurity and dependency into a beacon of sovereignty, strength, and self-reliance. As French troops prepare to leave Chad, the question remains, what comes next for the Sahel? Will these nations succeed in forging a new path, or will the region descend into further chaos? One thing is certain, Chad's decision is a bold step that will shape the future of the Sahel for years to come. Chad, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, these nations are sending a clear message to the world. If you believe this is a story everyone needs to hear, like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it widely. Together, let's shine a light on the voices shaping Africa's future.